Do you have a maniac woman in your life? I don't know. Probably not a good idea. Hopefully, your girlfriend or wife is not. But Frankie seems to be, and let's see how she became a maniac woman. Starting with the IMDb plot. An inspiring LA singer songwriter confronts childhood trauma, internalized misogyny, and industry fat shaming until she finally breaks out. All right. So she might have had a little bit of maniac building inside of her until she just let it out. All right, so this is definitely an interesting one, and have some interesting thoughts back and forth about this one, and kind of where I stand on it. And even as I sit here and start recording this, kind of divided thoughts on this one overall, and I guess I'll get into that in a second. But let's talk a little bit about Frankie, and I mean, just starting off here, I'm just looking here real quick at IMDb. It doesn't seem like a lot of people have seen this or at least done a rating of it. So I'm a little ashamed of that. I think it's something that maybe people should see, and I know it didn't seem to get pushed out there maybe as much as it could have, but there's some stuff here to see, like I said. So yeah, we have a interesting scene in the opening that kind of ties in where the story eventually goes, and I think some of the imagery in that kind of opening scene was really good, and I think that kind of theme continues throughout the movie. There's going to definitely be some interesting shots and themes. I should say the way they shoot her. As this film goes on, there's definitely some interesting moments there, especially from a visual standpoint. Definitely early on, that one that kind of opens in a way, and even though it was in a obviously different setting in a different place, as that kind of kicks off, it reminds me of Texas Chainsaw and the mask he wears, and kind of the scene where he's kind of like taking the chainsaw and just going around like crazy, and just kind of letting it out, the craziness. And as you see that opening scene kind of open, and where she is, and the way they shoot her, and just also she kind of seems to be letting it out a little bit there. It was kind of set the stage here, but after we see that, it kind of turns, and we see a little bit of her, maybe prior to this and prior to her being a maniac and becoming a serial killer in a way. We see some interactions with people she works with, people she's around. You kind of get to learn a little bit about her struggles. Obviously, it mentions in the summary there, fat shaming. She is a little bit heavy set woman. So they definitely don't shy away from that. They make it a point to see that she's seen in a different way because of that. She is part of a small band, or if you want to call them. But she is, the lead and the most important. What you gather is the most important person here, but you see her like in one scene, she can't even get into the place they're singing, because the guy at the door just thinks that she's just trying to get in, and doesn't realize that she is the lead of this band, and he's largely basing that on her looks. So they're not going to shy away from that, and so forth. And it's obviously something she feels, and is a big, theme in this movie. And so you're going to see kind of some of her struggles, and kind of definitely kind of feel sorry for her, because she's just trying to do her thing. She's just trying to get along. She's just trying to do her thing, and to have her place in life, and so forth. I don't think that they overdo it, though. I mean, they're not going to paint her where she's so soft that she's a hugely fragile person. obviously there's issues there. Obviously she realizes what's going on around her, and there's obvious struggle there. Uh, but I don't think they make her the weakest of weakest characters to begin with. Um, Before obviously things change. So yeah, eventually she snaps, and eventually she starts to kill people here and there. Um, some of them are a little bit random, and others are a little bit more targeted. Um, yeah, she's kind of taking out her aggression. Obviously, uh, maybe she felt wronged by a person or two or whatever, or maybe it is just because of a person's looks. They look different. They look like more of what she perceives as what other people want her to look like, but she obviously doesn't look like. Um, so she's going to have some interesting killing moments and so forth, and it's just going to progress more and more. And in a way, she becomes a serial killer and so forth. Um, in between kind of flashes of her, kind of going amongst her regular life until, she has a moment where she thought she got the upper hand on somebody, but I guess it didn't go as well. I mean, let's just not say that, I guess the first couple of times, she did all right for herself, but, this is a new experience, and she runs into a little bit of trouble where she also, she gets a victim that kind of put up a good fight as well. And it actually leads to a pretty interesting scene, as both of them are kind of like injured on the floor and basically having a conversation. It's like, Frankie tried to kill her, she survived, she tried to survive and kill her killer or and so forth, but both of them are then down on the floor, and having an interesting moment. And I liked it because it's something different. Obviously, you don't see too many times, we see this kind of conversation between killer and victim. And particularly in the middle of the movie, this is, maybe you might see that at the end of the movie where obviously one of the other is going to die for good and the movie kind of ends. But here we're kind of in the middle, and we're having this interesting conversation here. So while you have a kind of dramatic, crazy scene, then it kind of all calms down as they're both just lying on the floor, saying basically who's going to die first, but acting almost like they're friends in the moment. So that was definitely an interesting scene and something different, and I appreciated that. Frankie's obviously going to survive that. But now, she's kind of killed a few, and now, people are kind of knowing that there's a killer out there. So, she kind of has to go in hiding in her own way, and she stumbles upon another group of women who are, again, that type of woman that, maybe others want her to be, and obviously she's not. And then she has a definitely interesting interactions with them, because, she's a little bit injured, a little bit in and out of it, but, she's thinks that maybe at first they're her friends, then maybe they're not. So, maybe she could be her regular self, but then maybe she has to be killer Frankie. So you see some interesting stuff there. And again, kind of continuing to play on her constant battle of where to fit in, are these people my friends or not? Who are these girls? Do I fit in even though I don't look like them or not? So there's definitely that issue, as well. And another interesting moment, I'm trying not to give away too much. There's another interesting interaction she has with one of these girls in the process of being crazy and so forth. Another interesting, kind of thing that maybe you would not see in maybe another movie. So it definitely is going to have some interesting moments between killer and victims here. But yeah, it is, and I won't say too much more. I probably given away a touch much more than I wanted. but it is, in at the end of the day, a slasher movie, but really, wanting you to feel sorry for the killer here. And we do get from time to time, a slasher movie with a killer that you do want to feel sorry for in one reason or the other. And, sometimes it's not as obvious in some of the others than, than others. And here, I think it's fairly obvious, why she's the way she is and what, the aggression she's taking out. And, why you may or may not want to feel sorry for her. I know that with some people, it's like, oh, well, she's now a killer, so I have to hate her, period. I don't care what her excuse is. There's no excuse for killing, and that's it. And, I think in reality, obviously, I think that's the way to go. Once someone kills, whatever their reason is, it's generally not excusable. Usually, I guess there you can make excuses here, or examples here or there, but, that's why we have, a legal system, justice system, whatever, blah, blah. We're not going to go down that road and debate all that. But I think here you have someone who, you see it and you feel her and you feel, why she's doing what she's doing. Again, excusable or not, probably not. But so, as moments were, like when she was fighting that other woman, are you rooting for her or not? You feeling sorry for the victim here and so forth. So you see her struggle, but then, so are you for her craziness or not? Being a slasher fan, I'm happy. I'm happy when she's killing people and going after them. I don't think there's any, deaths in here that are like, will hugely blow you away or say, no, I have not seen that before. Again, mind you, Frankie's not been doing this forever. She's fairly new at this. Obviously, she makes several mistakes in the movie. Again, a little bit of part of who she is, and another part of it just being, she's just not an expert killer, even though she almost feels that momentum and feels that maybe she is, and maybe she is unstoppable. And, maybe it's just taking her as being a different person to have a better feeling in life, or that she's on top as opposed to always being kicked and being kept down. So, another thing that's kind of interesting here is that I think generally in, some of these slasher movies, usually we see the slasher and they kind of have one look. They'll have one mask, they'll look the same way or whatever, and be very similar, especially when it comes to killing. Here, she's not always the same. Like, it kind of starts that way, but I think almost there's going to be several different times where there's something just a little bit different about her look, whether it's her mask, the way she's dressed. Definitely a somewhat funny and definitely different one towards the end. I won't give it away. Maybe if you saw the trailer, but definitely an intriguing one towards the end of how she looks and looking that way as she goes and tries to kill. So I thought that was something a touch different as well, and kind of enjoyed that aspect of it. Again, I think there were some moments of the film and the way they kind of paced it and shot it that I think they tried to make it a touch maybe old school or just in a different way, and that turned out annoying me a little bit. It was just, I guess, the style that they were trying to pull off of filming it and putting it together. That bit kind of annoyed me. So while there were things that I liked, and definitely certain shots of her, especially, in her mask and killing and so forth, like I said, the opening, and then there's several other moments that I liked. There was just, I don't know if it was the pacing or just the way they shot it in other ways, or how, kind of the story folded. I don't know. There was just something about, the way they paced it, maybe. I don't know. There was something there that I think they were trying to do that wasn't working for me. I don't know if those that saw it might have picked it up or not. or maybe we're focused on something else. But that kind of got under me a little bit. But overall, I can appreciate what they did. Obviously, put a character here, giving you a character, to feel one of two ways, or maybe down the middle for, as opposed to just saying, "Hey, there's a crazy person. They're here, and they're just gonna kill a bunch of people." Sometimes slasher movies will focus a little bit more on that killer and that killer's pain, or reasoning for it, and then others, might give that reason but then move quickly away from it. So they definitely kept that in your mind the entire time, or every time she killed. I think there were some fun moments with the kills. Definitely, she had some great interactions with victims throughout it. So I thought, that some of the stuff they sprinkled in that tried to be a touch different than the usual, I liked. Again, there was something else about it that just kind of irked me in a little bit. Probably not a big way. As I'm, again, looking down at IMDb, I see a 5.5 out of 10, but only 126, I guess, rating. So not a lot of people have seen it, so not a large, sample there. But I think I liked it a little bit more than that. Obviously, the blood and guts are a big part of that. But I think overall, I liked, the direction and what they were trying to do, even though, and certain shots and so forth, but maybe not, perfect and totally great with it. And obviously had me wondering in a spot or two. But I liked it enough, and I liked it enough. I think I'm going to give it 3 pools of blood, kind of just above down the middle. I'm probably tending towards, because it is a slasher, because it's blood in the guts and the craziness and her being a maniac. And I guess, sometimes when you use, maniac, maybe you could have thought she could have even pushed the boundaries a little bit more. But I thought it was okay. I thought, especially towards the end there, the true maniac in her kind of came out enough. So, yeah, I think I'm going to go 3 pools of blood. And I really wished, maybe a few more people would have seen this movie, especially if you like slashers. Maybe you're not for the slasher with, kind of that background, and you don't want to hear about fat shaming and this and reasons why you should feel sorry for them. Maybe you just want the mask and whatever, and want them to kill, which is fine. I guess that's usually the way I like the slashers too. But I didn't mind it here, and I thought, it gave you something to think about in certain situations and as the film went on. So again, 3 pools of blood for this one, and hopefully, for large of you that might not have seen this movie, maybe at least give it a chance, especially being a slasher, to at least give it a chance. So with that, horrorsgoryreviews.blogspot.com, so you can find all of my reviews written in video. Certainly tons of video reviews for a while now, so you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody does here on YouTube. If not, no worries, it is okay. I thank you for your time regardless. Blue Sky, Facebook information down below. Reach out to me there, talk about horror, this movie, if you really, if you happen to have caught it or not. If not, in the comment section, if you do catch it, your thoughts on her. Maybe we'll see her rise from and come again. Interesting stuff there. We could use some more women slasher movies, and maybe even sequels to that. I mean, why can't they come back? And kill some more too. So yeah, with that, I guess I'll catch you in the next review, horror fans.